Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're in the quiet market town of Selby in North Yorkshire. This was historically the West Riding of Yorkshire. A chilling mystery has lingered here for over a century. The unsolved murder of Mary Ann Palgrave. Mary Ann was 65 years old and lived with her husband John Palgrave. They had been married over 40 years. The couple had lived in Selby for 27 years, having moved to the district from Norfolk. As far as I can tell, they have no children or family in the Selby area. On November the 21st, 1921, Mary's life met a tragic and mysterious end. This account will take the form of a walking tour of the town, visiting all the main places of interest in the case. I have pieced together this account from newspaper articles from the time, outlining the events surrounding the murder and subsequent coroner's inquest. The matter, known as the Selby mystery, was reported widely across the whole of the United Kingdom. I will now, during the course of this video, try and give some understanding as to what happened here in Selby in the autumn of 1921. A friend of the Palgraves, John Benson, was visiting from Hull and had lunch with the couple at their home on Shipyard Road, not far from the town centre. The area has changed considerably since then, with new apartments where the old terraces once stood. Benson and Palgrave left the house at 1 p.m. and spent the afternoon on the market. Selby Market is on a Monday, and even in my lifetime was a big event with livestock and goods for sale. There was even a relaxation of the strict licensing laws to allow all-day drinking. Palgrave is recorded as a rope maker, but there is also a reference to him selling eggs on the market. Whatever the two men were doing in the town centre, it is recorded that they spent some time at the Griffin pub, which was the pub that I showed at the start of the walk. It was known then as the Keel and Griffin. Palgrave had drinks, but was said not to be drunk. The market, as you can see, covered a big area, from the actual marketplace where the Griffin was, all the way up to this area in front of Selby Abbey. Benson says they were together all afternoon, with Palgrave seeing him off at the train station at 4 p.m. Palgrave says he left Benson for a few minutes to pay some checks in, and that he got home around 4:10 to 4:15. The Selby station inspector said the train mentioned left at 4:40 p.m. Palgrave gave two explanations that I can see as to how he found his wife. The first was later on the day of the murder, when he attended at Selby railway station to ask to borrow the station stretcher to take her to hospital. He told Benjamin Hanley, the railway clerk, in response to being asked what was the matter, that at about 4:30 p.m. he went home and opened the door and shouted to his wife that he was going to feed the pigs. She didn't reply, and when he went in the house, he found her with her head on the floor and, in his words, bleeding like a stuck sheep. He said he had got the doctor, but was afraid his wife was not long for this world. He thought she had had a seizure and fallen downstairs. Palgrave was described as sober and not excited. The buildings behind me, where I'm standing now that we've just walked past, is known as the Crescent. I believe this is where the doctor was called from to the house. As you'll see on this walk, nowhere is very far in Selby. Any of the locations we're going to visit are no more than 5 or 10 minutes from each other. I'm walking through Selby Park here, and we're heading towards the Palgraves' home address at Shipyard Road. The Crescent is in the buildings just to the right. This is where the doctor's surgery would have been. At the inquest, Palgrave was asked if he wished to give evidence. On the advice of his solicitor, he made a statement. In it, he said what had already been said, that he left the station after seeing his friend off, went to the boot shop for a few minutes, then returned home between 4:10 and 4:15. He said the door was partly open and he shouted to his wife that he was going to feed the pigs. He said he picked up the pig bucket, which was near the door, and that he heard a moan. He said he went in and heard another moan, then saw his wife in her chair, and that there was a lot of blood. He said he ran at once for help. The coroner asked him if he had seen anything of the iron hinge. He said no. The relevance of the iron hinge will become clear a little later in the story, but it's quite possible this is the weapon that was used to kill Mrs. Palgrave. And as we can see, on the day in question, Palgrave is saying that he hadn't seen it and didn't know where it was. Palgrave continued by saying he bathed his wife's face. He asked her if she had fallen downstairs, and she replied with a slight yes. The doctor came and told him the case was serious, so he made arrangements for her to go to the hospital, where he saw her 3 times a day, except for on one day. After dinner, on the day in question, he had asked his wife to boil some pig potatoes for him. He was questioned about how many times he went in the house before he fetched help. He said it was only one, despite witnesses saying it was more than once. He was asked why he didn't seem upset about his wife's situation. He replied that it was hard to such things. He could not suggest any motive for the attack on his wife. He understood after speaking to Dr. Summers later in the day that his wife had been injured due to foul play. So we're just coming up to Selby railway station here. It's kind of unchanged really. There are a few modern buildings, but a lot of it is as it was in the 1920s. This is where Palgrave had to come for the stretcher in the evening. It's literally 2 minutes to Shipyard Road from here, but it's at the other side of the railway, so it is a longer way round. The River Ouse is at the end, and we'd turn right there to walk down Ousegate to Shipyard Road. There were just a couple of things that came out during the course of the investigation that seemed to grab the attention of people at the time. Mr. Palgrave was a member of the Selby Poor Law Guardians. He'd been nominated, I think, just that year to take up that post, and it was before the welfare state, and I think they administered to the local poor, sick and needy. It also came out that his wife was insured. I'm not sure it has any relevance, but she was insured for £15, I think, which when I looked was worth about 900 in today's money. But I think he, although not a local dignitary, he could be described as somebody who was aspiring to be something in the community. So this is Ousegate. It runs from the main road bridge in Selby over the Ouse down towards the Selby Canal. We're going to come in a few minutes to a pub called the Malt Shovel pub, which is only about 100 yards from where Palgrave and his wife lived. There was a very relevant meeting at the pub the next day between Palgrave and a police sergeant from Selby. I'll cover this more once we get the events of the 21st of November out of the way. So we'll carry on now. At the very end there you can see some flats. That's roughly where the houses would have been. On Shipyard Road. I think the area on the left here would have been docks. It was a very busy inland port, was Selby, with quite a big shipbuilding industry. Again, I have vague recollections of watching it on television as a child when ships were launched sideways into the river. So this would have been a very vibrant, thriving and close-knit community. And as I may have already said, Selby was much smaller than it is today. And I think everybody would have known everybody else's business, which is one of the fascinating parts for me of this case. So we're just coming onto Shipyard Road now, and I'll pop a map up on screen, which is reproduced by permission of the National Library of Scotland. But the houses would have been on the left-hand side, a sort of low terraces, similar, I think, to what we've already seen in Selby. On the right, directly in front of us, behind the pub, was a timber yard, and beyond that, a waterworks. I don't know, but I have a feeling the Palgrave's house was at this end, because one of the witnesses lived at number 2, which I'm imagining was at this end. Here I go on a slight diversion just to give you an idea of the geography. This whole area now behind the houses on Shipyard Road, it was an actual shipyard. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes just out of interest having a walk to the canal. I've always actually wanted to see the place where the Selby Canal goes into the River Ouse. And then I think going the other way, I think it joins up with the Aaron Calder Navigation Canal. So as I say, a really vibrant industrial area with boats coming and going from all over the north, really. Mm-hmm. The last person to see Mary alive was a 14-year-old girl, Alice Leach, at around 2:30 p.m. She lived, as I said, at number 2 Shipyard Road, which I'm imagining, although I'm not certain, is at the end nearest to the Nelson pub. She was asked by Mrs. Palgrave to help her mix some pigmeal. The girl passed the house again at 3:30, and Mrs. Palgrave was sitting on her doorstep, but the pigmeal had gone. She said that she didn't notice anyone else about. Ellen Durning of 1 Clarkson's Yard, Hoosgate, said that on the afternoon in question she sent her son John to the Palgraves' house. He left home for this purpose at 3:55 p.m. and returned at 4:20. He said the house was in darkness and he could get no answer to his knocks. At 4:50, which is over half an hour after Palgrave says he returned home, Dr. Ernest Yago from Selby was called to the house by a little girl. He said Mrs. Palgrave was lying unconscious on the couch, bleeding from wounds to her head. One of the wounds was very severe. The husband initially told the doctor that his wife must have had a fit or fallen downstairs. At the inquest, the doctor stated that he did not think the wounds were caused by a fall. He stated that he told the husband she was in critical condition and that she should be sent to the hospital. He said the husband helped make arrangements to get her there. Dr. Yago bandaged Mrs. Palgrave's head, covering her wounds. John Palgrave then attended at Selby railway station and approached a railway clerk at 5:55, 1 hour and 5 minutes after the doctor arrived. He requested a stretcher to transport his wife to the hospital. He recounted finding her injured and bleeding. Suspecting that she had suffered a fall or a seizure. So, armed with his stretcher, Palgrave would have set off to the Selby Cottage Hospital with his injured wife, at least 2 full hours after he said he found her. Selby's not a big place, as I've said, and there wasn't an ambulance service, I don't think. There wasn't a 999 system. But you certainly could be anywhere within minutes. And this is one of the strangest things about this case. This poor woman had laid in this terrible state in the front room of the house, not far from where we are now. Unconscious, bleeding, and it had taken over 2 hours to even set off to the hospital. Selby was lucky. The cottage hospital was built, I think, by private donation because of the shipyards. So, unlike a lot of the rural areas around here, the people here could actually get to the hospital easily in under 10 minutes. The other strange thing at this point is that while Palgrave had been out going to the railway station, presumably, he'd also been seen by a witness in the marketplace, and he'd also stopped a local policeman to ask him to come and help carry his wife to hospital, but it didn't stop the local policeman to tell him that someone had entered their house and tried to kill his wife. So more on that at the inquest. But now we're going to walk the route, just so you can see how close the cottage hospital is. There were other ways they could have gone, but I just feel that having to cross the railway to get to the hospital. This is the quickest way. When the policeman arrived, Dr. Yago had already bandaged her head. So what he found was a woman sat in a chair, laid on a couch, head bleeding, bandaged. And he asked the husband what had happened, and the husband perpetuated this idea that she'd either fallen or had a seizure. This was proven to be impossible. He's told many times that she'd said yes or nodded her head or even spoken to him, and doctors swore on oath that she was unconscious from the first blow. Anyway, we'll do this walk now to basically what is the other side of Selby. The cottage hospital has now been demolished, but interestingly it's been replaced by a modern doctor's practice. So we'll get there in a few minutes. But Mary Ann was admitted there on the 21st of November, and she succumbed to her injuries and died on the 1st of December 1921. The cause of death was determined to be compression of the brain due to a fractured skull. For me, one of the most interesting aspects of this case, I suppose, is that before the 21st of December was over, and after Mary had been admitted to hospital, 3 people knew that she had been injured due to foul play. Dr. Yago, who attended at the Palgrave's home address, and then Dr. Summers at the hospital, who was Dr. Yago's senior. And they both told Palgrave that his wife's injuries had been caused by foul play. Interestingly, and we'll see this a little further on the walk, the courthouse where the inquest was held, and also where the sergeant and 3 constables who covered Selby at this time were based, is literally 100 yards from the hospital. The either lie or mistake that Palgrave made early on about his wife falling or having had a seizure seems to be perpetuated to the point where the next day the police sergeant from Selby, Sergeant Pickles, was in the Malt Shovel pub, the one that we've passed twice now on our walk, and it seems that the landlord, and as I said earlier, being a small town, everybody knows everything, the landlord of the pub seems to have asked what the situation is regarding the woman who's been admitted to hospital with 6 or 7 serious injuries to her head. At this time, it seems the police didn't know about these injuries or how serious the case was, because the previous night the constable who went only thought that it was an accident. This sergeant somehow meets Palgrave, and later says that he isn't invited by Palgrave, but he actually goes to the house. This is the next day, and when he gets to the house, he finds what's described as a hinge, the hinge we referred to earlier, about 18 inches long. I imagine the big old-fashioned hinges that you see on doors, quite substantial things, and it was resting in the fire. And when he was asked about it, Palgrave said that this was used as a poker and that they used it to rest a pot on. The hinge was in the fire, so any blood or hair evidence it may have had was lost. Although the inquest didn't find that it was the hinge that killed Mrs. Palgrave, medics agreed that such an item could have caused her injuries. It seems that following Sergeant Pickle's discovery, the police swung into action, and a series of searches, for want of a better word, were conducted at the house, and tests were conducted, including a check of the stairs, and there was no blood or hair on the stairs. In fact, the only place there was blood was where Mary had been sitting. The inquest also found that she'd got an injury to one of her fingers, and I think they concluded that she was attacked from the front. So maybe the injury to the finger was when she put her hand up to prevent being struck. So we're in a sort of more modern part of Selby now, mostly modern houses and supermarkets. There was a huge cattle market at Selby, shown on the maps. That was on the right hand side. It's where there's a Morrison's supermarket now. The inquest was held over 3 days, over about 3 weeks in December, and the coroner gave the jury 2 options basically: to send a specific person forward for trial of murder, or find that Mary had been killed by a person or persons unknown. They concluded, one report in the newspaper says after 14 minutes that this was in fact the case in Mary Ann's death. So despite everything, all the investigations that took place, all the newspaper reports across the entire nation into this mystery, no arrests were made, and the case remains unsolved. As we've seen, the houses on Shipyard Road have long since been demolished, but this mystery of Mary Ann Palgrave endures, leaving unanswered questions, I think, in Selby's history. So we've passed where the cattle market would have been on the right hand side, and the area now on the right hand side is shown on the old maps as a bowling green. The cottage hospital, which, although the walk seems to have taken a while, and it must have seemed to have taken hours if they carried this lady to the hospital, pushed her on some kind of stretcher. It must have seemed to take ages, but it's not. It's not even maybe 10 minutes walk. But this is the hospital where she was brought on the 21st of December. Obviously not this building, this is a modern doctor's practice, but the Selby Cottage Hospital was here. And what is, as I say, remarkable is how close it is to the police station and courthouse. I just show this school, this old school here was built in 1811. And when the cottage hospital, I was reading the newspaper report when the cottage hospital was opened, all the dignitaries met in there before the opening ceremony. So personally, I found this quite a sad case. I never intended making videos like this on the channel, but I'm an avid reader of all kinds of things, and I was talking to a colleague at work about unsolved crimes against women, and I was doing a little bit of research and came across this, and it is a sad fact. Men have committed crimes against women through all time, and maybe, I don't think there's any maybe about it, if this case had been dealt with now, it would certainly have been dealt with very differently, whether the outcome would have been any different. But it was just in the end, my colleague actually convinced me to, it was a story worth telling, because otherwise it would be forgotten in the mists of time. So that's what I'm doing. As I think I'll say again later, or maybe I've said already, I'm not passing any kind of judgment. I'm just wanting to record the facts. The courthouse. So how long did that take us to walk from the cottage hospital? About a minute. And I think this is where the police were based. Although I wasn't 100% sure, but I think this is also where the police were based back in the 1920s. But we're nearly back at the marketplace now, so I'll take a few minutes there to, read the reports. I think it's worth reading, and you've got as much information almost as I have. I'll read the reports of the inquest. But for now, for the walk around Selby, I'll bring things to a close. And I think this just serves as a reminder, really. It's a tragic story, but it does serve as a sombre reminder of the many unresolved mysteries that lie within our communities. But I'll head back to the marketplace now, and we'll conclude the video there. Hi guys, and if you're still with me, thanks for watching the video so far. I've concluded the walk around Selby now, and I just thought I'd take 5 minutes in the centre by the Abbey to sum things up. As we've passed the cottage hospital where Mrs. Palgrave died, and the courthouse where the inquest was held, and the police station where the investigation was centred. I thought in conclusion I'd just read the newspaper reports that were in the Yorkshire Evening Post over the three days that the inquest was held in December, and then just conclude with what are possibly some inconsistencies in the case, and then let you make your own mind up, really. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to read from these newspaper reports. So the first one is from the Yorkshire Post and Leeds Intelligencer on Monday the 5th of December. It's titled The Selby Mystery. Doctors' suspicion of foul play. The West Riding coroner, Major Arundel, held an inquest at Selby on Saturday afternoon respecting the death of Mary Ann Palgrave, aged 65, of Shipyard Road, Ousegate, Selby, who died in Selby Cottage Hospital on Thursday morning last from injuries mysteriously received at her home on November the 21st. Mr. C.H. March, solicitor from Selby, represented the husband, John Palgrave, a member of the Selby Board of Guardians. Mrs. Angelina Smith, niece of the deceased, gave evidence of identification, and in reply to the coroner stated that Mr. Palgrave and her husband were on good terms. They had always been comfortable. After evidence by Miss Alice Chapley, matron at the hospital, as to the admission and death of Mrs. Palgrave, evidence was given by Dr. Ernest B. Jago from Selby, who said he was called to the house at about 4:50 p.m. on November the 21st by a little girl. Mrs. Palgrave was lying unconscious on the couch, bleeding from wounds to the head. One of the wounds at the top of the head was very severe. In reply to the coroner, witness said he did not think the wounds had been caused by a fall. The coroner: what did you tell the husband? I told him she was in a critical condition and that she should be sent to hospital. When you told the husband this, what did he do? He helped to get her to the hospital and assisted in making the arrangements. We both went to see Dr. Todd so as to get her into the hospital at once. Did he help you in every way to get her into the hospital? Yes, he was very anxious to get her in. Was he quite sober? Yes. Witness said that the post-mortem examination revealed 7 wounds on the left side of the head and a wound on the left ear. 5 were superficial scalp wounds and 2 were depressed and comminuted fractures of the skull. When he saw Mrs. Palgrave, he thought the wounds had been caused about an hour or an hour and a half. In reply to further questions by the coroner, witness said all the injuries to the head could not have been caused at the same time by one impact, nor could they have been caused accidentally by a fall. The wounds were caused by a sharp instrument and could not have been self-inflicted. The coroner: you found the deceased suffering from these serious wounds not caused by herself, and you thought it a serious matter. Did you inform the police? No. Why? Didn't you think it was serious? I did. I thought the relatives would go to the police. Had you any suspicion these injuries had been caused improperly? Yes, I had a suspicion. Did you tell the relatives so? No. Then how could you imagine the relatives would tell the police? I told them it was very serious, and I told Dr. Summers. Witness added that compression of the brain caused by fracture of the skull was the cause of death. In reply to a further question, witness said, at the post-mortem examination he noticed that the left index finger was bruised. It was a recent bruise. In reply to Police Superintendent Stafford, witness stated that when he saw the wounds were serious, he informed Dr. Summers immediately. Dr. Summers told Mr. Palgrave the same evening that the wounds were not self-inflicted. The coroner intimated that this was as far as he intended to carry the inquiry that day. He adjourned the inquest until noon on the 13th of December. The second article is from the Yorkshire Post and Leeds Intelligencer on Wednesday the 14th of December 1921, again titled The Selby Mystery, Palgrave's Evidence, and a further adjournment. The West Riding coroner, Major Arundel, sat for 5 hours at Selby yesterday. In further investigation of the death of Mary Ann Palgrave, aged 65, of Shipyard Road, Ousegate, Selby, who died in Selby Cottage Hospital on December the 1st from injuries mysteriously received at her home on November the 21st. The inquiry was then adjourned for a week. At the opening of the inquest on the 3rd of December, medical evidence was given as to 7 wounds found on the dead woman's head during a post-mortem examination. At the opening of the adjourned inquest yesterday, Mr. C.H. March, solicitor of Selby, represented the husband, John Palgrave, a member of the Selby Board of Guardians, who was in court, and Colonel Coke, Chief Constable of the West Riding. Superintendent Burton, Wakefield, and Mr. F.M. Farmer, West Riding County Council, also watched the case. Dr. E.B. Jago said the most serious wounds were those on top of Mrs. Palgrave's head. The iron hinge, which was produced in court, fitted the wounds and might have caused them. When he was first called in the house, it was quite tidy. In answer to Mr. March, witness said he did not think an operation would have been of any avail, or that it would have caused a recovery of consciousness. Dr. John Benson McGanahan of Selby, who with the last witness made a post-mortem examination, said that compression of the brain following fracture of the skull caused death. The wounds were the result of violent blows which could have not been accidental. They could have been caused by the hinge if used edgewise. Colonel Coke, in your opinion, would Mrs. Palgrave be rendered unconscious immediately the blows were struck? Witness, yes. At any time afterwards, would she be able to understand coherently any questions put to her? No. Further question, the witness said that he thought the blows were struck from the front. He did not think it necessary to take a plaster cast of the woman's head. George Stanley Benson of Tadman Street, Hull, manure merchant, said that on the afternoon of November the 21st he had his dinner at Palgrave's house when husband and wife were on good terms. He left with Palgrave at 1 p.m. and was with him all the afternoon at the market. Palgrave, who saw him off by train about 4 p.m, was quite sober, although he had had a few drinks. Beelby Harry Nichols, Balby Road, Selby, station inspector, said the train mentioned left at 4:40 p.m. that day. A widow named Keturah Firth, living near to Palgrave, stated that during the many years she had known them, she had never seen them quarrel. She saw Mrs. Palgrave sitting near the door at 3:30 p.m. on November the 21st, but she never saw any other person there that afternoon. Elizabeth Leach, another neighbour, said that over a number of years she had never known the Palgraves to quarrel. She heard no noise there that afternoon. About 4:15 p.m, Palgrave came to her and said, "Will you come and look at my missus? She is groaning." She went in and found his wife hanging over the side of the chair with her head bleeding. Palgrave spoke to his wife and asked, "What have you been doing? Have you been falling?" He got no reply. Afterwards, when his wife was removed to the couch, he asked her if she had fallen downstairs, and she replied yes. Palgrave did not seem to be at all upset, but he made all possible arrangements to get his wife to the hospital. 2 or 3 minutes before Palgrave came to her, she had seen him pass her house. The hinge produced had been used for the fire, but she did not see it on the afternoon when she saw Mrs. Palgrave. There was no sign of a struggle. Questioned further, she said that Mrs. Palgrave was lame and had to walk across the room with a stick, but she thought she would be able to carry a pig bucket. Palgrave gives evidence. Palgrave was then asked by the coroner if he wished to give evidence, and on the advice of his solicitor, he made a statement. He bore out what the witness Benson said, except that he was away from him a few minutes to pay some checks. After I left the station, he continued, I set off home. I called at a boot shop for 2 or 3 minutes and got home between 4:10 and 4:15. The door was partly open and I shouted, I'm going to feed the pigs. I picked up the pig bucket, which was near the door, and then I heard a moan. I went into the house and heard another moan and saw my wife on her chair. There was a lot of blood about. I ran at once for help. The coroner, did you happen to see anything of the iron hinge? No. Continuing, witness said he bathed his wife's face. He asked her if she had fallen down. He asked her if she had fallen downstairs, and she replied with a slight yes. The doctor came and told him the case was serious, so he made arrangements for her to go to the hospital, where he saw her 3 times a day, except on one day. After dinner on November the 21st, he asked his wife to boil some pig potatoes for him. In answer to Colonel Cook, he said he did not meet a boy named John Durnin on his way back from the station. Colonel Cook, how many times did you go in the house before you fetched Mrs. Leach? Witness, only once. If 2 people say that you told them the first time you went into the house you found your wife was not there, that is untrue. It depends how they understood it. I never went in more than once. You were not very upset when you saw your wife injured. I am very hard that way. I can face things like that and should not feel them after the first moment. I cannot suggest any motive for the attack upon my wife, he added. After Dr. Summers spoke to me, I knew there had been some foul play. Statements as to Palgrave's movements. John Thomas Eyre, an engineer's labourer of Shipyard Road, Selby, said Palgrave had told him that when he first went indoors his wife was not there. Palgrave had a quick temper at times. Robert William Lumley, a Selby shoemaker, gave evidence as to Palgrave's movements, and Arthur Walker of Barlow Terrace, Selby, said from a conversation he understood Palgrave to say he went into the house only once. Arthur Leach, the husband of a previous witness, spoke of taking the bucket of pig meal to the sty on the afternoon of November the 21st. But it was too hot for the pigs. He gave particulars of a subsequent test made by the police when it was found that pig meal took 20 minutes to cool from the temperature he calculated it to be on that afternoon. Evelyn Middleton, Carr Street, Selby, domestic servant, stated that at 3:30 on November the 21st, she saw a person. She did not know if it was man, woman or child talking to Mrs. Palgrave. A little boy named John Durnin said he was sent by his mother on the afternoon to Palgrave's house. He got there about 4:10. The blind was down. He knocked several times on the door, but no one came. He heard very heavy snoring in the house. There was a bucket of steaming pig meal outside. He then went home and saw Palgrave in the marketplace at about 4:25. At this point, the coroner adjourned the inquest until December the 20th at noon. Okay, so the last report was on Wednesday the 21st of December 1921, again in the Yorkshire Post and Leeds Intelligencer. Selby woman's death, verdict of murder against some person unknown. What has become known as the Selby mystery is in one sense now no longer a mystery, since the coroner's jury, who have been investigating the cause of the death of Mary Ann Palgrave, the wife of a member of the Selby Board of Guardians, who died on December the 1st from injuries received on November the 21st, yesterday decided that the woman was murdered. So far, however, as the question of the perpetrator or perpetrators of the crime is concerned, the affair remains as complete a mystery as ever. The coroner pointing out that there was no direct evidence implicating any particular person. At the adjourned inquest, which was held yesterday by the West Riding coroner, Major Arundel, the husband of the dead woman, John Palgrave, was present in court with his solicitor. Mr. C.H. March, the Chief Constable of the West Riding, Colonel Coke, represented the police at the inquiry. The first witness called yesterday was Alice Leach, a girl just under 15 years of age who lives at 2 Shipyard Road, Selby. She said that at about 2:30 on the afternoon of Monday, November the 21st, Mrs. Palgrave asked her to mix some pig meal for her. Witness put the meal and water in a bucket, and Mrs. Palgrave stirred up the food on her own doorstep. About an hour later, the witness passed Mrs. Palgrave's door, at which the deceased was sitting. She did not notice anyone else about. The bucket was not then at the door. Ellen Durnin, the wife of a bricklayer's labourer of 1 Clarkson's Yard, Ousegate, said that on the afternoon in question she sent her boy John to Palgrave's house. The boy left home for this purpose at 5 minutes to 4. He returned at 4:20 and told the witness the house was in darkness and he could get no answer to his knocks. Benjamin Hanley, a railway clerk, said that on November the 21st, Palgrave, the husband of the deceased woman, came to the station master's office at Selby at 5 minutes to 6. He asked the station master for the loan of the ambulance to take his wife to the hospital. Asked by the station master what was the matter, Palgrave replied, "About 4:30 I went home, opened the door and shouted to my wife, 'I am going to feed the pigs.' She did not reply, and I went inside the house and found her with her head on the floor, bleeding like a stuck sheep." Palgrave added that he had got a doctor, but was afraid his wife was not long for this world. He thought she had a seizure and fallen. He was afraid she had fallen downstairs. Palgrave was perfectly sober and was not excited. Police Constable Fred William Clark, stationed at Selby, said at 4:20, at 5:20 on November the 21st, he was in Holmesgate when Palgrave came to him and said, "Constable, will you come and help to convey my wife to the hospital?" she has fallen downstairs. The witness accompanied Palgrave to his house. In the house, the witness asked, "Has she fallen downstairs?" And Palgrave replied, "Yes." She just nodded yes with her head. The doctor had finished his work and Mrs. Palgrave was lying on the couch with her head bandaged. The witness reported the case as an accident. Police Sergeant Mason Pickles said that on Tuesday the 22nd of November he was told by Thomas Calpin, the landlord of the Malt Shovel Inn, that Mrs. Palgrave had 6 wounds on her head and that these could not have been caused by falling downstairs. The witness met Palgrave near to the public house and asked him how his wife was. He replied that she was still unconscious and that he had seen her that morning. The sergeant then asked if it was true she had 6 wounds on her head and that they could not have been caused by falling downstairs. Palgrave replied that Dr. Summers told him the night before that she could not possibly have received the injuries by falling downstairs. The witness accompanied Palgrave to his house and saw sticking in the fire, with about 4 inches showing, a hinge. The witness asked Palgrave where he found this hinge, which is about 18 inches long, when he entered the house and found his wife injured. And he answered that it was in the corner of the fireplace. In reply to a further question, Palgrave said that when he entered the house, the door to the stairs was shut and latched. The witness examined the staircase and found no marks of blood there, and Palgrave then agreed that his wife could not have fallen downstairs. The witness then noticed a blood stain about the size of a dinner plate on the coconut matting near the place where Palgrave said he found his wife lying over a chair. There was no trace of blood anywhere else in the house. The next day, the witness again visited the house. Palgrave told him the hinge was sometimes placed across the fire for the purpose of resting a pot on it. It was also used as a poker. In answer to the coroner, the witness said there was no blood on the hinge. The coroner: "Did Palgrave give you the impression that he was about to report the case when you met him?" The witness: "He did not, sir. He seemed to be just going about his business." Answering the chief constable, the witness said he did not expect to find any blood marks on the hinge when it had been in the fire. The witness, in answer to Mr. March, said that Palgrave did not ask him to go to the house, but gave him every assistance when he arrived there. Police Inspector Woolley, stationed at Sherburn, said the staircase in Palgrave's house was wood, and a test which the police made proved that sound caused by anyone walking up or down the stairs could be heard next door. Superintendent Robert John Burton of the Criminal Investigation Department at Wakefield said that on November the 28th, Palgrave made a voluntary statement in which he said he asked his wife if she had fallen downstairs, and she replied something which he took to be yes. This completed the evidence, and the coroner, in summing up, pointed out to the jury that the medical evidence was that death was due to compression of the brain, consequent on fracture of the skull, caused by the infliction of violent blows with an instrument such as the hinge referred to in the evidence. Death was clearly not due to an accident, for with regard to the evidence that the deceased replied yes when asked if she had fallen downstairs, the doctors had stated that she was not in a condition to comprehend coherently what was said to her. It was not manslaughter, as there was no suggestion of provocation. The circumstances pointed to murder, but there was no direct evidence implicating any particular person. It was, however, for the jury to say whether the evidence was sufficient to put a particular person on his trial for murder, or whether the crime lay at the door of some person or persons unknown. After an adjournment of 14 minutes, the jury returned a verdict as follows: that Mrs. Palgrave died through a fracture of the skull, that the injuries causing the death were inflicted by blows with some sharp instrument from some person or persons unknown. In answer to the coroner, the foreman said the jury could not say that the hinge produced was the instrument used. There you have it then, guys. The 3 days of the inquest that was held not far from here in the courthouse at Selby into this unfortunate woman's death. I've been wondering whether or not I should make this video. It's 104 years ago almost. It's probably never, the truth will never come out because everybody's dead who was in it. But this poor woman, she died in terrible circumstances. So I thought, if nothing else, without being judgmental, I'd make a video outlining the facts as I know them, as I've seen them reported in the newspaper. The difficulty is there is so much information I haven't got a full transcript of the inquiry, what the police did, what was said at the inquest. But on the face of it, there are some pretty glaring inconsistencies, not least the fact that this man seemed to persist with the idea. That he asked his wife how she'd come by the injuries, and she said she'd fallen down the stairs, even if it was a nod or a yes, despite doctors saying the contrary. The hinge wasn't there on the day that people went round to the house. By the time the poor woman was in hospital, at whatever time that would have been, 7 or 8 o'clock on the evening of the 21st, John Palgrave, Dr. Yago and Dr. Summers all knew that she had been murdered. As you've seen on the walk that I've just done, from the cottage hospital to the police station is about a 2-minute, literally 2-minute walk. Not one of them went and reported it to the police as a murder. At the time, Selby was much smaller than it is now, and it had a sergeant and 3 constables at the police station. You've also seen the Malt Shovel pub, which was about 200 yards from where the Palgraves live. And as it reads in the inquest, the sergeant was in the pub, and the pub landlord says, "Do you know about this woman who's in hospital with 7 wounds in her head and her head smashed in?" He then meets Palgrave, doesn't say whether that's arranged or whether it comes across him, and he isn't asked to come to the house. The sergeant goes to the house with him, and there the sergeant finds, that wasn't mentioned the previous day, the hinge in the fire. So that's the most glaring for me, the fact that 2 professional doctors are aware that a murder's taken place in Selby, and they don't tell anybody. That's how it seems, and that the police sergeant had to find out for himself, because the constable who went on the day to help him take her to the hospital only saw a woman with a bandaged head and was told by the husband that she'd fallen down the stairs. So the report was written up as an accident. So there are lots of other little inconsistencies about timings and various other things, but I just think, for me, that's the most glaring one, that 3 men knew this woman had died by murder. As I say, I'm not being judgmental and I'm not into conspiracy theories, but somebody died and no one was brought to justice for it. And the other interesting thing is, after that inquest, on the face of it, there was a violent murderer of women on the loose in Selby, and I've found no record of a manhunt or anything like that for said murderer. So as I say, I'm not being judgmental or trying to pass any judgment. It is what it is. The facts are what they are. It was a mystery in 1921, and it's probably going to remain a mystery. But thanks for watching. If you do have any comments or any knowledge of the case, then please leave them below. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.